When you think of Washington State, what's the first image that comes to mind? Well, whatever it is, chances are it's probably not the whole story. You see, hiding behind all those stereotypes is one of the most dramatic, volatile, and honestly misunderstood landscapes in the entire country. No, seriously, take a second. What's the first thing that pops into your head? Are you picturing Seattle? Gloomy weather, endless rain, maybe grunge music and coffee on every corner? For most of us, that's kind of the default setting. But what if I told you that the state famous for its rain is also home to a high desert that grows the majority of America's apples? And no, that's not a contradiction. That right there is the central story of Washington. It's a tale of two completely different worlds, literally split in two by one single, incredibly powerful force of nature. So, to really get a handle on this divide, we gotta go way back. We're talking about the raw, elemental forces that have been sculpting this land for millions and millions of years. This is geology on a truly epic scale. And it all boils down to this one key idea, something called the orographic effect. Just think of the mountains as a giant wall. All this wet air comes rolling in from the Pacific Ocean, slams into this mountain wall, and has nowhere to go but up. As it climbs, it gets colder, and cold air can't hold as much moisture, right? So, boom, it just dumps all that water as rain and snow. By the time that air finally makes it over the top of the mountains, it's been totally wrung out like a wet towel, and that creates a super dry rain shadow on the other side. And wow, on the west side, the results are, well, they're staggering. We're talking about the Olympic Peninsula getting an incredible 12 feet of rain every single year. That's not a typo, 12 feet. This creates the only temperate rainforest in the lower 48 states. And here's a cool bit of trivia for you. This is also where you'll find Cape Alama. That's the actual westernmost point of the contiguous U.S. A lot of people think it's in California, but nope, it's right here. Okay, so while the West was getting absolutely drenched, the other side of those mountains, well, a completely different and way more violent story was unfolding. We're talking about the last ice age, when this whole region got scoured by floods so powerful it's hard to even wrap your head around. So here's the play-by-play. You had this huge ice dam up in modern-day Idaho holding back an absolutely enormous lake, glacial Lake Missoula. And over again, that dam would just break. When it did, it unleashed this wall of water, hundreds of feet high, moving at highway speeds. I mean, the sheer force of it just tore away all the topsoil, carving straight into the hard volcanic bedrock below. What it left behind is this scarred, almost alien-looking landscape we now call the Channeled Scablands. On top of that violent, flooded history, there's another elemental force at play here: fire. See, Washington is sitting right on top of the Pacific Ring of Fire, and what's happening is that the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate is constantly diving underneath the North American plate. All that friction and pressure melts rock deep underground, creating magma. And where does that magma go? It rises, forming this whole chain of 5 active volcanoes, including, of course, the infamous Mount St. Helens. Just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, let's just look at Mount Rainier. This one single volcano is home to 28 named glaciers. That's more permanent ice and snow than all the other Cascade volcanoes put together. Now, all that ice creates a really unique and, frankly, terrifying danger. If an eruption or earthquake were to rapidly melt even a fraction of it, it could trigger what's called a lahar. And this isn't just a simple mudslide. We're talking a destructive, super fast flow of hot ash, rock, and water that comes roaring down river valleys like wet concrete. It's a huge threat to all the populated areas down below. So, okay, you've got this landscape of just incredible extremes, right? You've got fire, ice, epic floods. So the story of modern Washington really becomes the story of people trying to figure out how to live here, how to engineer their way around these massive challenges. Let's take early Seattle. The first version of the city was built right at sea level, basically on mudflats. And this turned out to be a really bad idea. I mean, every time the tide came in, the streets would flood. And even worse, the toilets would back up, and everything would just flow right back out into the city. Yeah, not great. But then, in 1889, the Great Seattle Fire happened and pretty much burned the whole wooden city to the ground. And as tragic as that was, city planners saw a golden opportunity. They decided, okay, we're going to rebuild, but this time we're literally going to raise the streets. They built these huge retaining walls, filled everything in, and lifted the entire street level, in some places by as much as 30 feet. What that means is the old ground floors of the original buildings became basements, creating this incredible network of subterranean passages that you can actually still tour today. It's known as the Seattle Underground. And the incredible engineering doesn't stop there. Take the bridges. You see, Lake Washington is super deep, and its bottom is all soft mud, making it basically impossible to build a normal bridge with support columns. So what's the solution? Well, you build bridges that float. And Washington has become the world leader in this crazy technology. Get this, they're home to 4 of the 5 longest floating bridges on the entire planet. So remember those apples I mentioned, the ones growing in the desert? Well, the scale of this operation is just mind-blowing. Washington grows about 60% of all apples in the United States. 60%. And this didn't just happen by accident. This is a total triumph of engineering over a really harsh landscape. And the absolute key to making that happen, the linchpin of the whole thing, is this, a truly monumental structure, the Grand Coulee Dam. It is, without a doubt, the most significant piece of man-made geography in the entire Pacific Northwest. I mean, its impact was just staggering. For starters, it's the largest power producer in the U.S. All that cheap electricity is what fueled the aluminum plants that helped Boeing build thousands of planes for World War II. But here's the real game changer. It also pumps massive amounts of water from the Columbia River into this huge irrigation network. And that is what turned over 500,000 acres of useless desert into some of the most productive farmland you'll find anywhere on Earth. All right, so beyond all these massive engineering projects, Washington's map is also just full of weird stuff. These strange little quirks created by history, by treaties, and sometimes by people just making mistakes. Let's start with Point Roberts. So back in 1846, you've got these diplomats in London and D.C. deciding on the U.S.-Canada border. They agree on the 49th parallel. It looks great on a map, a nice, clean, straight line. The only problem, they didn't really look at the terrain and didn't realize that their perfect straight line sliced the very tip off a peninsula. And the result? This is tiny little piece of America that's totally cut off from the rest of the country by land. So, for residents to get to the rest of Washington, they have to cross the border into Canada, drive about 25 miles, and then cross another border back into the United States. Imagine that being your daily commute. And if you think that's weird, get ready for the Pig War. So, the same treaty that created Point Roberts had some really vague wording about the San Juan Islands, and nobody knew who they belonged to. Well, tensions finally snapped when an American farmer shot a British-owned pig that was eating his potatoes. Seriously. This tiny incident escalated into a 12-year military standoff between the United States and the British Empire. And the best part? The only casualty in the entire conflict was the pig. Okay, so all of these stories we've been talking about, the rain and the desert, the volcanoes and the dams, even the weird history, it all comes together. It all points to this one central idea that you have to understand if you want to understand Washington today. It's a concept known as the Cascade Curtain. Essentially, that massive Cascade mountain range acts as a giant dividing line, a curtain that splits the state in two. On the west side, you've got the wet, mild climate, most of the people, and an economy built around tech and aerospace. Then you go to the east side. It's dry, the population is sparse, and the economy is all about massive-scale agriculture. And this split isn't just about geography and money, it extends to culture, to lifestyles, and even to politics, creating these two very, very different versions of Washington, all inside one state. So, you see, Washington is so much more than just a monotonous land of rain. It's a state that is completely defined by this division, all of it, stemming from that one massive wall of mountains. It really makes you think, is there any other state in America whose entire identity is so completely and totally split in two by a single geographic feature?